Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Immunity Blueprints Summit. I am your host, Lynn Delgadio, along with Emily Fisher Bunker, your other host. And we are pleased to say that we have today part two of our discussion with Rob Scott.
Yes, Rob Scott had so much really good information. He's very easy to listen to. And I know that you're going to enjoy today's video too. Sit back and enjoy.
If we're taking like a limiting belief and we're trying to put a more positive thing in, we're trying to literally maybe reprogram our mind. One of the ways to do that is to change the story of it through time. So go back in time and see times when it was true. And it's great if you have those legitimate memories that you can find. But even if you can't, put them back there so that you can connect with, time. So let's say I want to put in a belief of, I'm amazing or something. It might be much more specific and based on a limit ultimately. But if I just choose something like I'm amazing, I want to think about all these times where I made someone laugh or I got the right answer in class or whatever. And we would stack memories like that. And even if I have to make them up a little bit, it's really good to do that. Then I see it now in the future, now and in the immediate future. And then I think about it long term. What would this mean in the future of my quote unquote timeline or sense of self? And all of a sudden, this is like repatterned in a new way of thinking and gotten our subconscious mind turned over into a way of really seeing something differently and coding it as true for us, which is very, very helpful.
So if you're trying to change your limiting beliefs, how long would you have to stack those memories, even if you're making them up? How long would you have to do that to convince your subconscious mind that that's the truth instead of what you've believed up until that point?
There's no guaranteed time. So if you do that in the way that I do it deeply in my program, literally doing it once can have an incredible effect on somebody. But I'm not going to claim that. It's very helpful, similarly to, one thought kind of changing your reality. That's very, very true. But if you've got this old habitual pattern, for some people, it might take a little bit longer. But it's so much faster than people think. If you really do that properly, along with some of the other tools that we do, you're shifted very, very, very quickly. And so, but let me back up. So we have a desire that a lot of these ways of being or ways that we're thinking about ourselves are more on autopilot. Okay. So where does that autopilot come from, right? If I have no stimulus happening, let's go back to the beginning, and we were talking about managing our thinking and our attention in a certain way. Let's say that you're perfect at that, right? That you have this skill of you can make the most useful, the best use of your attention in any moment. You can move it from thought into experience. You're perfect at that. You're Buddha level at managing your conscious mind, right? There's two dimensions that come up that are going to mess with however perfect your mind might be. One is the external world, right? We're built in an entropic system that is going to, unless we keep it orderly, it's going to tend toward disorder and difficulty, right? You're going to have a partner that's upset with you. You're going to have a boss that's maybe being difficult. You might already have addiction or family members that are struggling, or, all kinds of things come up, right? So everyday life is going to consistently mess with this thinking. So besides just managing your thinking, there may be some goals to do. You might need to refigure out how you eat or how to make more money or whatever those things are externally, right? Well, as we talked about at the beginning, if you're just in a white room and you're perfect at managing your thinking, you still may have thoughts coming up. Well, where are they coming from? They're coming from the unconscious, right? So the second place that can mess with your conscious thinking and your own mastery of your attention is what's patterned into your unconscious mind. What's been told to you over and over? What have you accepted as true? And you'll notice that with no stimulation at all, thoughts are still popping up, right? So even if you're sitting in meditation and you may get these longer and longer gaps of no thought, thoughts still come up. Well, where do they come from? What's happening there? The unconscious mind is going to serve those up to you. And in some cases, those are, I'm not enough. I'll never get where I want to go. I'll never find the partner I'm really looking for. I'll never make the money, whatever those are. So even if you can see that and then move that attention, if you don't deal with your unconscious mind also, you're then in this, even with this great skill of being able to move your attention around and manage your own thinking, you're batting back these bad patterns, right? So one part of it is gaining the skill of that conscious mind. Can you manage your attention in consciousness that you're aware of so that you can make yourself more aware of your thinking and what's real and not real, what's a thought versus what's real to deal with, et cetera, and make that the best that you can. Externally, can you set goals and accomplish them? Are you good at using that focused attention to accomplish what's most important to you? Do you know your values and all that? Then the other area is in your unconscious mind. Can you repattern some of those subconscious things so that instead your brain is serving up really useful things? Lynn and I have had a conversation, and she figured out how to do this and has done this incredibly well. Well, to a great degree, she's probably rewritten a ton of her unconscious mind so that just much more without her day-to-day effort, her mind is more positive. It's popping up more things, right? So moving your mind over to a thought of gratitude will change your experience of this moment immediately. It really will. So the first skill to get is, can you move your attention around? Can you move it out into the sensation of your breath? Something stressful comes up. Can you take 3 conscious breaths and just bring it back to breath and have that as a practice? That's fantastic. That's step one. If you can't do that, you're going to be lost. You're going to be lost in thought. You're going to be lost in not knowing where your attention is and what's real and not real. And it's going to feel, quote unquote, a little crazy maybe. Okay. After that, can you optimize your unconscious mind so that you're not battling these old negative patterns that you can't even see because they're unconscious, right? They're popping up thoughts that you're taking on as real because they're outside of your own awareness, right? I often say to people, you could be the best brain surgeon in the world, but you can't really do brain surgery on yourself. Like sometimes you just don't have the perspective to get at things. Well, that's how our unconscious works, right? There's so much going on under the hood. And if those patterns aren't idealized, you'll tend to see in your life continual relationship problems or continual money and success problems or continual, anxiety that just won't go away, persistent things like that. Much of that is in the unconscious realm. And so the immediate thought, just to wrap it up, I know I'm talking about a lot of things here. The immediate thought is incredibly useful when you see it, right? Once that's come up and it's in your consciousness, moving your mind is there. Once you get into repatterning the unconscious mind, that can take very quickly for some, a little bit more for others. But once you do that, then your brain is serving up more useful stuff unconsciously, and it really moves your life forward in a big way.
And as good as some can get at this, like I just over the weekend realized, my God, I was triggered.
Yeah.
And we'll still get triggered. And so it's how quickly can you respond? And did you allow that to gain so much momentum? And was there more than one trigger going on? Like this weekend there were, and an anniversary of my buddy, my dog dying, that was one. And there was a couple, and then, so it was harder for me to stop it as quickly maybe as normally I would have in other circumstances. But every time I go up north, I've got to do a lot of meditating because I know that environment's going to be a trigger for me, and so there's all sorts of different triggers that are, maybe we're aware of, maybe we're unaware of. When you did this earlier, I got triggered.
Yeah.
But then some of these things can also stay in your body, and you maybe gotten proficient, with your limiting beliefs. And sometimes maybe there's something going on in your body where you gotta let it burp it out just a little bit more, right? Because your body's still holding a memory versus, does that make sense?
It does. I mean, we've already talked about that whole system of what your body, how your body responds to thinking and all that stuff. You can absolutely get, stuck in things. I want to speak for a second about that trigger thing, because it's really interesting. I mentioned Daniel Kahneman earlier. He talks about sort of 2 systems of the brain. One's the fast and more automatic one, and system 2 is slower thinking and more thoughtful. And we're really inspired to kind of have system 2 offline because it takes more calories to run it. It's harder work, and so much of our unconscious mind or our automatic systems underneath are just there. They're easier to have there. It's easier to not do this work of like trying to move our consciousness around. It's a little bit more calorically expensive, right? So, and I think this was in one of his books, but you could imagine like an enlightened person having lunch with somebody who's drunk. Okay. and a third person walks in who's very maybe loud and annoying, or maybe they are just wearing crazy clothes or whatever's going on. Both of the people, the enlightened person and the drunk person, have the trigger of noticing it, right? Like something happens there. Okay. But the enlightened person has much more mastery over that level 2 mind, which is like what do I do with that trigger, right? Something's been there. Like, we don't want necessarily no trigger, right? That would mean that I'm not seeing what's happening around me potentially, right? So a loud sound or something dangerous happens, we don't want to like cut that off, right? Enlightenment is not ignoring what's happening. We're as aware as anyone else of seeing it. But the drunk person has no control over their own response, right? They start going, "What are you doing? You look ridiculous," or they can't stop that impulse of what's happening, right? There's an impulse that goes on. And so now they're interacting in a way that maybe later they wouldn't be proud of, because they've shut down a portion of their mind being able to deal with what that impulse was. Whereas a more enlightened person can see it, they can more consciously choose their response, etc., and they can manage their own kind of internal response to that too. Well, as we've said before, triggers don't just happen in the external world. They happen in our own thinking all the time, right? Every thought that we're having is a potential trigger to grab onto and follow and be attached to, right? So you could be meditating and working on, maybe not thinking or just being in sensation, but a thought comes up and it's like, that's what my next book is about, and we can't let it go. We've got to stay with it, right? So that practice of, do I have control over my response to a trigger, is exactly what like the art of meditation is working on, right? That's what we're trying to figure out, so that every thought isn't a trigger that needs all our attention and is quote unquote reality that needs every little bit. Oh, but like, what about this? And oh my gosh, what about that? And all of these things are triggers. Again, they could be coming from the outside, whether it's news that's on or somebody calls or something happens, right? Now, how those are patterned and how we respond, if you grew up in a place where being around your parents needed you to survive in a certain way, you're going to have really thick neuronal bundles ready to just go right back online when you go home to see your parents, even as an adult. So that trigger then has a whole lot of other kind of regular response. And so it's going to take more to overcome that trigger and how what that means to you and what you do in the response and all that.
I want to talk more about identity shifting too, but can we first talk a little bit about, because talking about triggers, we are going through a really chaotic time right now. And we were talking earlier about how, oftentimes maybe there's maybe one potential threat out there. Maybe the stock market's tumbling. Maybe there's, your kids are sick and you're afraid you're going to catch it yourself, or maybe whatever it is, there's a natural disaster. I mean, everything is happening. We've got multiple threats happening right now: financial, economic, environmental, all bombarding, physical, and the magnitude at which, and the speed at which it's happening, and the media and the high alert, the way that they're really trying to get to your primal fear. What are some tools? Can you speak to that a little bit? And what are some tools that maybe you can offer?
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly we have a lot of triggers happening for lots of us, and they could be very, very different, right? Some people might be actually sick and having that to deal with, right? Some people might just be afraid of the health, thing here. They might be scared for people that they care about and worried about them and triggered for that. So many other people are looking at the, economy and what's happening there, and quite literally losing jobs or being worried that they might lose a job. And all of this is happening kind of at the same time. And we've got a culture where gaining our attention through fear, right? Having fear kind of be that base level survival. All the news media and media in general has learned that if you trigger fear, it's what we, for safety reasons, feel like we have to pay attention to. And we're into this attention economy where everybody's fighting for attention. So we get all this over sensationalized headlines and news things and all that stuff. So then a legitimate crisis comes along, everybody's there. I've heard many times that, some journalists write the news and do the journalism. There's a whole other department that's writing the headlines. And often the headlines in the article, the person who wrote the article is like, I would have never written that headline. It's too sensational. But they're trying to win on clicks and our attention. And this is something we as a world have to start becoming more aware of and understanding, and figuring out like what is truth, like who are we to believe? Because as people are doing these things, you start to cry wolf so many times, and all of a sudden people don't believe you, and then there's a real wolf there, and now we don't know who to believe, and we have people that are arguing about it and all that stuff. So it's a really important thing. So gaining mastery of your own attention and realizing when you're triggered by shifting into this level of being aware of your own thinking and your own attachments through part of these practices that I'm talking about here, that allows you to see, wow, every time the news is on, I don't feel good, and I'm not really getting any more information, right? Like I got the information that I need. And, so I'm not saying don't be informed, but many of us have the news on just all the time, and we don't need to have it on all the time, right? If there's something really important, it'll get to you. Like someone will let you know, someone will text you, or you'll see it somewhere, once you're on social media or wherever, it'll be there. Checking in on the news sometimes is great to stay informed, but also know that they're sensationalizing quite a bit of it often, right? Certainly some of them are, right? I don't want to say that, any absolute statements there, but they're being incented to sensationalize it. So, one, understanding that it's a little more sensational often, that things often, the first thing they say about it, it may not be that bad. So take it with a grain of salt. Stay informed, but don't become addicted to it, right? And notice that impulse of fear that, fear tends to tell us you should be afraid because it's so dangerous to stay afraid. But really what a healthy emotion does is you have fear when it's appropriate, you react, and then the fear should go away so that you can have all the other emotions. But these things tend, I call it like emotions can become liars to us, right? Because they're kind of arguing for their own permanence in you, right? If you're angry at someone, the anger might be kind of telling you like, stay angry. That guy is a jerk. That's all that. And so we end up staying angry. You can't trust him, so stay angry. You got to hold on to that. You got to hold on to that. Well, it's way healthier to be angry, do whatever's appropriate, let that move you, and then let it go so that you can not become quote unquote an angry person or have that start to be a part of your identity that you take on. So in these times, how do we manage this? At the core of this is absolutely our attention. Can we manage where our attention is? And sometimes just quieting it down, watching less news is very, very helpful. But also then watch, what is your thinking doing? Did you turn off the news, but you're still lost in it? Can you bring it back to breath? Can you think about something else? Can you go hug your child and love them? Can you go for a walk? Can you do something physical to manage your own attention in a better way? I'd love to, we already talked about back to breath a little bit, but can I add kind of explicitly what that simple practice is?
Absolutely.
Right? So in the words of bring it back to breath, like that's the whole practice, right? And it's a really great anchor for people. And I have a free challenge that people are welcome to check out. You can go to backtobreath.com and learn more about that. But it's just a 7-day challenge where you pick any amount of time that you want. It could be a minute a day or something. And you're just trying to do this practice for 7 days to see what's different. And each day I give you a little bit different way to think about it. And people have really profound results going through this, going from not knowing how to meditate at all to really understanding what mindfulness is and what we're doing with our attention here. And so the heart of that, and there's a handful of other things that I share through that process, but the heart of it is this idea of bring it back to breath. And so what is the it there, right? The it in that is your attention, okay? So, and I actually was building this when I was highly dysfunctional. I was working on this stuff and reading deep books way back when I was still heavily in addiction and hanging out with bad people and all kinds of rough stuff many, many, many years ago. And it really was born when I was in a situation, I was using it myself, but I ended up saying to a friend who was about to do something that was pretty bad in a store with a clerk. And I grabbed the shoulder and I whispered in his ear, bring it back to breath. And he understood because he talked to me enough, and he just took a deep breath in that moment. And this potentially pretty violent situation was kind of, abated or stopped. And we ended up walking out, and he was really moved. And what he learned there is that it is our attention. It is all these places, and maybe we're really mad. And one of the just direct shortcuts out of that is if you can move your attention back to your breath. Just move your attention back to what your nostrils feel like or what the physical sensation is of the breath. And it cuts off the attachment to the potentially addictive thought or the place where we're quote unquote lost in that moment that may not be useful, right? So again, I love thinking. I love using thought as a tool. I do a lot of it, right? But I'm also very aware of how to stop it and come back into sensation and be really present. Beyond that, when you gain that skill a little bit longer, you'll find that allows you to really be more sensual, right? I think that in our culture, we tend to equate that with sexuality, and I don't mean it that way at all. I mean just letting your senses, which is really the poetry of life, right? It's beautiful when you can really receive a massage and be present with it. It's beautiful when you can really eat delicious foods or you can notice it. And if you just bring it back to breath, that's kind of where that begins. To then kind of let that widen and open into where literally every step on the ground can be one where you're happy and present and really beautiful. Now, I don't want to oversell it because for those of us suffering, just getting back to normal is really, really helpful. But if you stick with this, you can get to exceptional and really beautiful and, maybe tending more toward enlightenment or some expression like that very easily.
Can we talk about individual stress versus collective stress? Is there such a thing as collective stress? I mean, the whole world is involved in this pandemic. And I think collectively, just in general, everybody's stress level has gone up. So even if you are, taking it back to breath or choosing where your attention is focused, can you still be affected? Can your stress level still be affected?
Absolutely.
And what can you do about it?
Yeah. So it's I have so much I want to say back to that. It's almost like we're fighting two viruses right now, right? We've got this physical virus that everybody's talking about how contagious that is. But if you think about, the fear virus or the panic kind of thing, that's so, in thought is so much more contagious, right? Because of how connected we are now. Now, that didn't used to be true, but now that we're all online, we literally could just have a few of the world leaders say something about something, and the entire world can, be triggered, right? So now how well we respond to that and how good we are at managing that trigger is one thing, but the source of the trigger, it could be immediate, right? So we saw how quickly the entire world responded to COVID, right? It's quote unquote, I'm not going to say everyone's infected because not everybody's panicking or anything, but the potential for that, everybody knows about it much quicker than everybody actually catching it. So the mind virus or the potential for that is so much more contagious today. And it's so much more manipulatable by the people that do own kind of the influence or the media channels or the whatever to pump the narrative there. So, where we have to gain control of that absolutely begins with us, no doubt. But then to support what everybody else is understanding and how to think about things is really, really, really crucial, right? One of the things I like to talk about is that story is way more foundational to our reality than we think it is. We sort of think that story is a reporting on top of reality, but story drives reality very, very deeply. And so one of our, especially since we're so connected and we can all talk share ideas as much as we can, it's our job, as leaders today to choose the collective story that we want to tell. Again, not a delusional story that's a fiction or a fantasy or something, but what is the best and most useful story of what it is to be alive, of what it is to share, what is human well-being about. And what's so funny is so many of us that are arguing about stuff, we all value human well-being. We just have a very different story about what the best path to that is. So some people think that, it might be guns and freedom and walking around and opening the economy, immediately. Other people are valuing human flourishing as, life and health and safety. And so we all need to spread, and it's not as tied to the economy. Both of those camps want human flourishing. They just have very different stories about what leads to that, right? And I'm not saying either's right or wrong. I mean, that's the hard thing, is like, what is the appropriate story and what do we need to be doing? But as we draw the story of ourselves through changing our memories and doing all that stuff to get like, what's the best story of me? What's the most useful so that I can be flourishing and happy? We also have collective stories that are very, very important. And they're just like somebody criticizing me could affect my self-concept. A news story can affect the social consciousness or the social story immediately. Ken Wilber and integral theory. I know I'm in a lot of places and we're talking about a lot of deep things, and this is a very deep talk that needs a lot more legs to it. But he has something called the AQUAL model, which talks about how there's 4 dimensions that are rising all the time, and it's a split of basically we all have internal and external, right? So there's objective reality out here where scientists live and they want to judge things and look at them. But there's also meditation and the experience internally that we have. And then there's also singular experience of things and plural experience of things, right? So in a way that might make sense here, we each have our own personal internal experience of what's happening right now. But through this conversation, there's also a we space that's coming up, right? And if we continue to hang out, there might be a mini culture that would start between us and all that stuff. So that AQUAL model speaks to knowledge and how it's got different perspectives, right? It's really, it's related in our language. Every language that's ever been spoken has always had an I perspective, a you perspective, a we perspective, and a they perspective. Well, that fits perfectly in this quadrant of AQUAL. There's an internal I experience, which is where like meditation lives. A lot of psychology lives there. There's an external singular, which is if I'm studying something out here, and they end up very different, meaning, a neuroscientist might find the neurons that this is happiness, and he might prove that, and that's objectively true, and people do that. But a meditator would go, that's not happiness. My experience of happiness is what's happy. And they're going to argue about truth, but they're talking about different perspectives. One is talking about an internal perspective and subjective, and one is talking about an objective experience. The other part of that quadrant is singular versus plural. So the internal we feeling is the culture of us, all that, right? But if we were to study groups or something externally, that would be the they perspective, right? Where we're looking at a plural external in some sense. And so that's very deep, and I don't know how much that matters to you guys, but there are structures that speak to how foundationally all the time our individual experience is arising and our collective experience is arising. The we space is happening all the time along with the I space, and often politically there's divides there too, like conservative people, and this is a very broad brush, but they tend to kind of honor that liberty, that I, that freedom, that internal kind of me space, not just in a selfish way, but they want to respect your me too, right? There's this, and they tend to like guns. They don't want to pay for this we space stuff. More liberals are more interested in not as much the I and the individual, but they're more interested in the collective or the we. They want, they're generally happier to pay a little bit more taxes to fix things. They want healthcare for all. They want those kinds of things. And so those impulses are speaking to 2 aspects that both really matter, right? The individual freedoms and liberties and all those kinds of things, but also the collective good. And so those kinds of dimensions of conversation are really, really important. So anyway, all of that is to say that yes, what's happening collectively and the stories that are happening there and the well-being based on that are very, very important. What we really personally control ourselves is kind of our internal space, but we're a part of that collective. And so how can we speak into that and maybe tell appropriate, new, different stories that are helpful to all of us?
And two, everybody out there's got a different perspective, and all perspectives are valid. So I think it's important too, especially in these times, to always be cognizant that someone else is going to have a different perspective, and it's valid. And everybody is where they are right now, and it's okay. Wherever they are. And let's just meet people where they are and understand that someone may be having a bad day. You take a breath before you say something. If someone says something negatively, just understand they're in a different perspective. They're feeling stress. It's nothing about you. I think we've probably touched on it in a lot of different ways here, but can you tell us what this process that you've developed, identity shifting?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Can you I know it's probably a little bit of everything that we've been talking about, but what's like the process?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a process that I developed to take people through changing your self-concept, who you are at the core. And so many feelings and behaviors and all that stuff kind of stem out of feeling differently about yourself. A very, very quick example that I use often is working with a very overweight woman. And when we, more than 100 pounds overweight, when we got together and really worked on it, when I asked her, who are you really? And we got honest about it, she had all kinds of horrible things to say about herself, right? So, I'm a loser. I can't keep my word to myself. I'm all these different things. Through the process, we shifted her into, I am an athlete. And so really, as an overweight woman, right? She's 100 pounds plus overweight athlete, but as an athlete, there's something that's different there. And this is just a teensy example of what's possible with this. But an athlete eats differently. An athlete is more active. An athlete has, sneakers to run in. An athlete gets their body moving daily or whatever, right? So those behaviors are in that sense of identity. And so what so many people are trying to do is they're trying to change through behavior externally, and it requires willpower. Willpower is the process of, we need that when we're trying to do something that's not us, right? If we're trying to become a runner or something, it takes willpower until it doesn't, until the subconscious mind takes over and says, hey, you're just a runner, right? Then there's no resistance. And then we just put our shoes on and go running because we are a runner, right? Our identity has shifted into this new thing. It includes a new way of being. So most of the time, our identity has been taken on really unconsciously. And so what I've really tried to tease out is that can be crafted consciously. And you can actually start to put in qualities and aspect of yourself that you really want. And this is what gets people over deep, deep, deep traumas, things like self-sabotage. We take your greatest limiting beliefs and literally turn them into superpowers, because often our greatest limits are right in the things that are most special to us. And when you overcome them, they truly become like superpowers for us. So this process takes people and it turns them literally into the best version of themselves that they can be. And it's not something that's like a one-time hit. You leave with skills where, as the challenges of life that continue to come up, you can apply these tools and continue to grow through the rest of your life as you do it.
Do they kind of get to know like their true self, like much better than they reconnect? Much better. They really are. That's so empowering. So
much better. Yeah. Because we tease apart these things that we think are true about ourselves and about the world. And all of a sudden you can see much more really the beautiful, amazing, highly gifted individual that you really are. And you can tap into that and change not only how you think, but how you feel and then how you behave. And we start to install things habitually that don't require willpower. There are things that habitually you can install in your self-concept as well, so that they're just right there for you to get up and do. So, taking somebody who's deeply phobic about public speaking and turning them into somebody who's just amazing and comfortable and awesome on stage, right? And so doing, major transformations like that really help people break through. So what are 5 things that would bring the most benefit in our transformation? That's a great question. There's probably a lot of different ways to answer that. I want to honor physical health, for sure. So, most of these will probably be in the mental space, right? Because that's really where I like to. I think it's the quickest way to shift. But I do want to honor, right? If you can stay healthy, right? Like changing your physical health, food, mobility, movement, avoiding addictions, right? Whether they be TV or substances, stay safe if you're in a pandemic, all those things. Obviously that matters quite a bit. But if we leave the other four to talk about psychologically, what can we do and what can we maybe do without moving a finger? Like what can be done? Meditation is a huge one. And there's so many health benefits that so many other people are talking about. That's fantastic. But the way that I want to talk about it, and just to break it down and make it really simple, is we're trying to figure out what is our attention doing? Like what is our meaning making doing? We're really meaning making creatures. We're trying to see things and make the meaning up, make the story up. And we get set on a pattern where that's not effective or useful or happy meaning that we're making, and we end up suffering and being dysfunctional and needing things like addiction to escape it, etc. So maybe the next four are something like attention is a place, really understanding that, really getting that as you move your attention around, it's building your reality, because your attention is your consciousness, right? Like when I put my attention in a book, Harry Potter, I'm whisked away for at least that period of time into whatever my attention is on, right? If I'm watching the news and I'm hearing, the sky is falling, that is my experience in that moment. It truly is my reality in that moment. So your attention is deeply important, and we're placing it different places, right? And if we can't manage that, we're not going to be very good at focusing on something that's important to do in thought, right? Like our taxes, or, coaching somebody for a period of time, or a talk like this for a couple hours. If we couldn't bring our focus to do it, we'd be, we'd be lost, like so many of us that are disorganized, et cetera. So just knowing that is probably one of them. The next one might be that skill of moving it around, right? So can I move my attention from something that I'm noticing is making me feel horrible or isn't useful? Can I pick a different thing, like something gratitude or a better option to think about? Or can I challenge what I'm saying negatively? Like, I'm a horrible person. Like, no, I'm actually a great person. Or what can I do in my thinking that's more useful in the moment? Ultimately, that leads us to the ability to make different meaning making, right? To not just buy whatever the impulsive thought is and trust it, but actually begin to challenge that and go, no, I'm the agent of my meaning making, right? And so then probably the fifth one would be the skill of being able to change your values and beliefs, and some of that unconscious work that we touched on, right? Can I figure out what my unconscious patterns are? Can I see where I'm habitually stuck in relationships or in money or in health or whatever it is? And can I learn how to recode those so that I have on autopilot a much better mental system happening and doing all that?
How do you best work with your clients?
Yeah, so it's not all individual. I mean, primarily we're doing identity shifting work, and so the highest and the best way to work with me on that is to join this mastermind. And it is a 6-week process, but we play with that format from time to time, and we're right now kind of moving that around. So that may be 6 lessons, but over like 11 weeks. So there's time in between for different coaching with me and all that. But it is broken down into 6 modules that are really, really powerful. And usually by the second or third one, people are having these profound breakthroughs, right? So it doesn't even take the whole time to really get to it. And because right up front, we're really finding out what are your deepest limits, what's going on. And we're not only reversing them, but we're recoding highly useful, quote unquote truths back in that are repatterning that unconscious mind. And that is profound. That literally leaves people that have had limiting beliefs their whole life, that they see how ridiculous they are, and they see how easy it is to put them down and what they can do about that. And that alone is worth multiples of the program. But then beyond that, we go on to getting into doing shadow work. We do, I have something called story casting, which is how we mess with memories and do things to make those healthier. We do some stuff based on timeline therapy, and there's all kinds of different tools and really interesting things that we're doing in that. Through that process, the beginning is really about thought. The middle is more about emotional mastery, and then the end is about behavior, habits, and what are we doing, and what's your purpose, and how do you apply this new person that you are out into the world in a way that's really meaningful and important and big for you. So that's at the heart of what we do. That's the work that I'm most interested in and working the hardest at. we have a home version of that. If people can't afford kind of the live work and doing it with me, we have a home version of that. And then we have other products that people can get. There's a very affordable monthly group coaching call with me called the Fundamental Shift Coaching Group. And that gets access to a bunch of the digital products that I've created over time. One is called Recode Your Mind, which is doing some of that unconscious work. One is called Hacking Happy, where they get to learn about their attention and how to manifest different emotions and gain more mastery of their, whether it be getting away from suffering or just really feeling grateful and happy and connected, back to breath, all those things. I've got a bunch of different programs like that.
So I just wanted to tell you, Rob, that I listened to you do a speaking engagement. It's probably almost 2 years ago now, almost 2 years. And you went through the process of changing our identity and dealing with the limiting beliefs. And I followed what you told me to do. I did it for 7 days. I addressed my limiting beliefs. I addressed my core belief of who I was, which was just really negative. I mean, when I wrote it down and I looked at it and I said, that's just an awful belief. And why would I think so little of myself? But that was the belief that I had been carrying with me since I was a child. And so I followed your regimen, what you had taught in this, and I found myself afterwards doing things that my old self would never have done. Like I was much more confident and brave, and just I put myself out there.
Yay!
I was just in awe of how just simply addressing my limiting beliefs and working to change who I thought I am at my core made a huge difference in just how I responded and behaved and the decisions that I made.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much that means to me. And something, something I say a lot is that if you just take one of your top limits and shift it, like that's incredible and can be life-changing, right? If you take your top 5 or 10 and rewrite all those and get those into your unconscious mind, that's, without a doubt, life-changing. But if you really gain the skill to be able to do that anytime with anything that comes up that's challenging in life, you literally have shifted your life. I mean, you're just a whole different level of happiness and performance and confidence and all the different things. And so it means so much to me to hear that you got to apply that and have that experience. It means the world. Thank you.
And I can attest because I watched Emily go through this.
Yay.
It's night and day. And I'll just give you an example or two. I was coaching a girl and I asked her to express her limiting belief out loud. And she said, I'm terrified that people are going to witness me failing. And there's a couple different beliefs in there, but I could hear her throat contracting while she's saying this. And I said, tell me how that makes you feel when you say that. She said, I feel awful. And I said, why is that? And she said, because it's not true. Exactly. It's not true. But just that first limiting belief, and the most timid girl you're ever going to meet. But within a couple weeks, I see her out doing like Facebook Lives. She's doing these videos. She's getting out there. She's being her, and she was very unique, a very, very, very unique personality. Yeah. And prior theretofore, would have been, scared of putting herself out because she didn't know, but she was unashamed, unapologetically her. And it was amazing just by that one thing. Yeah. I'm sure she was practicing more, and I've got a client who, just within like 3 weeks, we were working on a lot of she's writing a book. She's like halfway through writing up. Her creativity went from 0 to 1,000 within a few weeks.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Really transformative.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I did, but there's a part of that where when it shifts, it doesn't require willpower, right? It's not this act. You're literally different, right? You have access to different things. You're comfortable doing different things. You can step in, gets you past self-sabotage. It gets you past procrastination, and you can start expressing yourself without resistance, right? Which is just so beautiful. And so when you can address some of these, glitches in the system, that we end up unconsciously taking on somewhere, and you can get rid of them and even rewrite them more powerfully, it's unbelievable what that leads to. I mean, it just literally is like a whole different direction in life, and it's very exciting. So I love hearing this.
And
Thank you.
one more thing too, I will say in my own experience going through this process on my own, I just got to this place of bliss.
Yeah.
Like not 100% all the time, obviously I'm a human being, but pretty consistently. But I remember one time I had to pull over to the side of the road because this joy just washed all over me.
Yeah.
And it was almost anxiety producing. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I sat and I was like, okay, I think I need to hold on to this and create almost a memory. Like I want to be able to bring this up on recall. And it struck me, this is how we're supposed to feel. But so many of us are walking around at a deficit of joy, but this process really does bring joy to people. And so that is such a gift. And we all applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, bliss is something that I'm very in touch with as well. And it's so funny that you said it was almost anxiety producing. My greatest mentor is a man named Will Holm, who was, when I was very addicted to stuff, helped me navigate a ton of that. I still talk to him to this day. So he's a father figure to me. I adore the man. He's amazing. One of the things he says all the time is, how good can you stand it? Right. So that ability to expand how much good you can take is that's a really interesting thing too, because we shut down. Sometimes it doesn't feel safe to feel good. Right. We have these patterns that we're used to where we want to play down or be less than, or don't be the tall poppy. You might get cut down. And so how good can you stand it? Can you open to more and more and more joy? There's more ecstasy or happiness or, contentment to have here. And it is silly how much I am, just able to be in and walking around and experiencing bliss and connectedness. And it's really beautiful. And so that is a possibility for anyone listening. And there's a lot of work that we can do to bring that in. Would you guys mind if I just did a couple minutes of just kind of saying what we just said, just so that it's a little bit succinct for people?
Yeah,
is that helpful?
So yeah,
there's a lot of information.
Yeah, and we can forget a bunch of it, but some of the foundational stuff is that we can sit in a room all by ourselves with no input and be miserable, right? And that's because we are meaning-making machines, and the meaning that we're making, whether that's coming from triggers outside or our own thinking being the trigger, that builds up neuronal bundles, right? Which as those bundles tend to fire together, they wire together, they get built up, they get faster, stronger, more automatic. And so we become habituated, not only in our behaviors, but in our thinking. And so that biology of belief that's there, that leads to physicality, right? Hormones, response in the body, and that can inspire us to stay afraid or to stay stressed out or to stay whatever dysfunctional. But all it takes is a new thought as the very beginning to begin breaking that chain, even though you may have a history in your body of what's been going on recently, but that it requires that shift. As we do that, we can build up bundles of gratitude or optimism or happiness or whatever instead. And that really does deeply change our life, right? And so this meaning making that we're doing has a ton to do with our identity. Our identity is based on memories and meanings that we've taken on. Many of them are based on in ways and on things that we think are permanent, but they're not. They're very, very changeable. In a moment, they're changeable immediately. As soon as your client saw that thing, she was different right after that. As soon as you really challenged the identity, a handful of days later, you're different, right? So it may take a little more time or a little, but it's way quicker than we think. And you can change that continued story of yourself. You can deeply shift your identity, learn how to manage your attention, right? Learn that anchor of back to breath. Know that your attention can only be in two places, either thought or experience. And when I say experience, I mean quite literally sensation. And the breath is a great anchor for that, simply because it's always changing and there's just always something there to kind of check out. So just bring it back to breath more often. And really, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
We're glad you're here too. So glad. Tell people real quick, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to just know more about me, or you want to check out my podcast and a bunch of free stuff, you can go to robscott.com. If you're interested in identity shifting specifically, you can go to identityshifting.com. If you're interested in that back to breath challenge and you just want to do a free mindfulness 7-day challenge, you can go to backtobreath.com. And then if you want to invest just a little bit of money at fundamentalshift.com, you can check out our group coaching program that has access to a lot of my digital programs and all kinds of other stuff. It's a great community and a really cool thing to join if you're interested.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom with us and with our audience. And I know if they apply just a little bit of what you've talked about, they'll see a difference in their life also.
Great. Thank you guys so much. It means the world to do it. Thank you.
Really important stuff. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.